Chronicled Wish banner has some odd flaws that we have absolutely got to talk about. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. First off, I'd like to begin this video by saying that I believe the Chronicled Wish banner is an excellent idea in concept. It would not be bad to group up old characters and weapons that haven't come back in a while so that there's a surefire place to get them. Plus, it allowed people who wanted to pull for standard units specifically to gain access to them on banners. Yet the execution of this was less than savory. For starters, while the concept itself isn't bad, listing certain characters as Chronicled Wish units is denoting them as legacy. They are old and therefore undesirable. This is only ever going to incentivize people to care about them less. It also means that Hoyo has officially thrown in the towel when it comes to potentially buffing these units. It's used more as a get-out-of-jail-free card as opposed to having any practical value. It's also quite clear that this is indeed Hoyo's intention with Chronicled Wish characters. Because think about it. Do you think that they are ever going to put Raiden Shogun on the Chronicled Wish, especially after all of the reruns that she's had? After all, I believe she definitely qualifies for the banner's conditions. No, of course they won't do that, because she's one of their big moneymakers. Plus, it's a bit weird to treat older units as useless and irredeemable when units that are equally as old as the 3 limiteds that were banished to the Chronicled Wish are still pretty good. Albedo isn't that much older than Xiao, who's an absolutely excellent Anemo DPS capable of doing wild numbers if you invest a good chunk into him. Shoot, Eula is a 1.5 unit, Xiao came out in 1.4, and despite both having had enough reruns to qualify, they slapped Eula on Chronicled first. And as for Klee, dude, she's not even that bad. Forward Vape Farina is a very good Klee team. I would say try it yourself if you have her, but let's be real, nobody pulled on the Chronicled banners. Except for me, I kinda have 60-ish pity laying around on there. I wanted Eula, man. It's not so much about collecting legacy units and putting them in one place where everybody can pull for them. It's more so about grouping up all of the lowest selling limited 5 stars and slapping them all in one place so that Hoyo doesn't have to think about balancing them anymore. And since Hoyo fixed one of the main issues with the limited weapon banner, the pro of Chronicled only requiring 1 fate point to get a weapon you want doesn't really stand anymore. It's a shame because it makes it very hard to look forward to the futures of these characters. I'm actually quite a fan of Albedo and Eula. I have a double crowned Albedo myself. Thankfully, I was able to pick up the lad before he got exiled to Chronicled. You can't even make the argument of, but they're old, because Xiao came out in 1.4 and Kazuha in 1.6. Both are very solid units. Now you could make the argument that these wish banners are regionally based, so because we got a Mondstadt wish, next we'll get a Liyue wish where we will actually see some of those older legacy Liyue units that came out around the 1.x era of Genshin. But somehow I highly doubt it, because do you think that they're really gonna treat somebody like Hu Tao as a legacy character? I doubt it. It feels like the banner was supposed to solve the issue of characters taking a long time to come back due to low demand, but without a clear schedule as to when the banner would return, or any idea of who we can actually expect to be on it, that creates more problems as opposed to solving any. Units that haven't been back in 20 billion years, such as Shenhe and Riesli, don't qualify the rerun number requirement, so we're stuck literally never knowing when those two will return. And that's another thing. What in the actual heck is the schedule for this thing? I think one of the actual most pressing issues in regards to this wish banner is how little we truly know about it. Sure, we understand the basic mechanics of it, but we know very little about when it will return and what will become of it. This makes banner planning kind of annoying because we'll be minding our own business preparing our primos for a certain unit, and then bam, a random Chronicled banner will appear out of nowhere with a couple of old units that you perhaps might be interested in. It's also a bit goofy mechanically. If these characters are old, bad legacy units and all, surely we should be able to use standard pulls, especially when a decent chunk of the Chronicled pool that we currently know of consists of standard characters. But I suppose that's up to debate. You could make the argument that using Primogems is better because you can procure those a lot more frequently than standard pulls. To that, I would say that if Hoyo is degrading the value of these previously limited characters down to standard tier, then standard pulls should be usable. But it could be a simple case of them not being allowed to do that because all 3 of the Chronicled limiteds were marketed as limited time units that follow limited time character rules. I think it was no coincidence that they ran this banner during 4.5 either. We should all be able to agree that that was a pretty dead patch, so perhaps the Chronicled banner exists to fill the cursed X.5 patches. Since whether it's a coincidence or not, the units that come out during X.5 patches tend to be cursed in some way, shape, or form. I wonder if Notlon will give us our first actually good X.5 patch. So if it returns during X.5, then I suppose the schedule will be every scheduled dead patch. I would hope that they build upon the Chronicled roster instead of limiting it to only being regional, because then only Archons knows how long it will take for the specific regional banner that you're waiting for to come back. And like I mentioned earlier, I have 60 pity on that banner from trying to get Eula, yet it hasn't returned yet. I didn't even proc a 5-star yet. If the banner simply does not ever return, does that mean that everybody who spent wishes on that banner has basically thrown primos into the void? Sure, you could just say that that's on us for trusting the banner, but how are we supposed to know that Hoyoverse would totally ignore the banner after one patch? It has to come back at some point. Otherwise, there's a good chunk of players who will have wasted gems on the banner. Alright, so we've established all of its core issues. There is essentially zero schedule, it inherently makes you feel like the characters on the banner aren't that valuable, and it kind of feels like Hoyoverse is mostly using the banner as a way to group up unpopular characters sales-wise, so that they don't have to waste valuable rerun spots on them. What would the fixes for all this be? Well, for starters, it's very easy to keep players in the loop in regards to when a new Chronicled Wish banner is coming. You know how in the Genshin dev notes they tend to tease which elements will be the core of the next Imaginarium theater? It is genuinely as simple as putting a line of text in the dev notes which reads, "The Chronicled Wish banner is returning in 4.5, get your primos ready." As for the issue of obvious bias, simple, don't be biased. Xiao, Hu Tao, Raiden, Shogun, they all gotta go on there eventually if you want to actually make it feel genuine. But then, another problem arises from that. People actually want those characters. See the issue here? The Chronicled Wish is inherently flawed as a means of grouping older characters, so instead change the mission statement of the banner. Explicitly state that the limiteds going on the banner are of lower value, and Hoyoverse does not intend to prioritize them anytime soon. That way, at least it feels less biased to specifically pick all the lowest selling limited 5-stars to put onto the banner. You aren't slick, Hoyoverse, it's pretty obvious as to what you're trying to do here. But honestly, I've already made a whole video on the topic which you can watch after this, but I think the true solution to all of this is adding triple banners into the game. There are always going to be some intrinsic flaws with this banner. It's a shame because I think the idea of it isn't actually that bad. I can see the vision that they were going for, but unfortunately the banner got infected by the Vision Hunt decree. Before, I would have suggested repurposing it as a place to access standard 5-stars so that people have a place to wish for them, while simply adding triple banners to the main banner system to slap on all of those unwanted 5-stars for all the people who want them. But, the standard banner already exists, my guy. Just add fate points to the main standard banner and you've got the same deal going on. Now, if you'll indulge me in some copium for a moment, I'm starting to think that the real reason as to why we haven't seen the banner return for so long is because Hoyo knows that it sucks. They know that it has issues, and I presume that the banner probably didn't sell very well. I genuinely do not know any of my friends who pulled on the banner when it was around. I know quite a few whales too, yet none of them budged. I think the people who actually dipped their hand into the water are very few and far in between. I seriously don't know what Hoyoverse could do to suddenly fix everything with the banner. I really think that if they're so concerned about wasting rerun slots, they should just tack these legacy units as a third option onto the end of another double banner. I think that most fans of Eula, Albedo, and Klee can attest to the fact that they'd rather have a dedicated banner of said limited to pull on, as opposed to having to pull on the Chronicled banner. And while this is a more niche issue, it makes it more annoying for whales to max out the constellations of any particular limited Chronicled unit. Remember, Klee constellations are quite strong. I suppose the one main good thing about the Chronicled banner is that you're able to lose your 50-50 to limited characters. If you're pulling for Albedo, then you might end up losing to Eula or Klee as opposed to one of the regular standards. That's pretty neat. In fact, I think that could be a salvaging point for the banner. Remove all the standards. We could pick them yearly anyway. Most people will lose to a few of them at some point. And the standard banner already exists for people who are willing to waste gems on legacy units. Add a fate point to create the same desired effect as shown on Chronicled, then you're good to go. If you can only lose to limited 5-stars, that adds some value to the banner while offering a fun gimmick. It also helps justify the banner only operating if you cough up some limited pulls. On the whole, I think that the Chronicled Wish is a very difficult banner to fix. It will, no matter what, cause people to look down on any units that are placed upon it. It's incredibly difficult to justify spending primos on a banner with such a poor, uncertain schedule. I imagine that Hoyoverse is working on something behind the scenes in regards to it, but I'm not sure if that's going to drastically increase the feature's popularity. Even a lot of my proposed fixes offer some other kind of negative in return. I get what they were going for, but a lot of reworking would have to be done in order to make the banner more appealing to a lot of people. Either way, I'm gonna let Hoyo cook and see what they come up with. I do hope that by the time the banner comes back, my previous pity won't have expired by then, because I'd like to at least proc a 5-star on the banner with all the wishes I've already spent on it, man. I remember when the feature was first announced. I was really excited for it. I thought it was gonna be this excellent step in the right direction, but in its absence, which is an issue in of itself, I've managed to take a closer look at the banner and see all of its flaws. I expected it to return once per patch, if not once per every other patch, but that ended up not happening. I do hope that when the banner comes back, it'll have had some changes made to it which add value to its concept. After all, the times have changed, and recent developments in terms of gifts from Hoyoverse and banner quality of life improvements have diminished a lot of the Chronicled banner's original value. Either way, what do you think about the Chronicled Wish banner? Did you think my ideas were absolute trash or pretty good? How would you improve and expand upon the banner yourself? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. Hopefully this video was able to tell you about the main flaws of the Chronicled Wish banner. This has been Juice, signing out, and Hoyo, come on, I believe in you. Add triple banners.